Understood what we want to do? We want to define a class called my English. So having some overloaded methods called display. Okay, so this method what display does is if you're giving a number as an argument, it should display in number in words for me. Okay, so what you call the number names, it should display in English for me. The number name it has to display for me. So what I have asked you is to restrict yourself to 1 to 4 only. So don't write the lengthy code there. You can just restrict yourself to 1 to 4. Okay. Then, so I have given test case 1, test case 2 I have given. So the first test case, if I'm giving display of 1, it should display for me ONE1. That is the output there. I want to have restriction only to 1 to 4. For example, if I'm giving display of 10, if I'm giving, so it should show me number out of a range for me, like that. So then, so I gave one more method we want to have it by name called display there. So this what we are doing is, so it takes a character as the argument and prints the word starting with it. Any word you can print it. So example, one test case I have taken. So called display of A I have given. So it should display for me apple. I've taken an example apple there. Now, okay, this is my test case 2 there. So test case 2, if I'm giving E, so we wanted A to D only. So E is unknown alphabet, it should be giving me that message. Okay. So I want you to do this. So I have placed it in the Google Classroom. I have placed the question. So just go through the question again in the Google Classroom. Okay. So complete the question, right? Any questions there? Anything that you are not understood, let me know. Anything that you are not understood here. So how to write this? See, only when you start writing, you'll understand that you are able to or unable to. So start writing it. We'll discuss one by one what is there. So two methods we are going to have it. So both the methods are having same number of parameters, but we are changing the parameter type we are going to change. Understood? Now I want you, everybody should solve it and then submit it to me. Okay, na? So this is the assignment part. Okay. You got the answer? Very good. So let's moving ahead. So we'll continue there. So last class we are talking about overloaded methods. We're discussing it. So where we said that multiple methods we can have it with the same name. Okay. But when you're going to have the overloaded methods, we said we'll follow two different rules. We'll be following it. One rule is rule number 1 says that some method should have the different number of parameters. It says. Then the rule number 2 says what? If the number of parameters are same, then at least the parameter type must be different. That is the rules of your function overloading, or what you call the method overloading for us. Okay, moving ahead. We can have constructors also. We can have multiple constructors also can be there for me in my class. Not necessary that I should have only one constructor in my class. I can have multiple constructors in my class. So when I'm having multiple constructors in the class, I have to follow the same rules of my method overloading rules has to be followed. That is, so I should have different number of parameters, or if number of parameters are same for two different constructors, then so data type must be different for you. That rule also has to be followed with the constructors also. The rule is going to be common for us. So anywhere, whatever it is, let it be the constructor or it is the method you are using it. So when I'm following the multiple methods or multiple constructors I'm going to have in a class, then you have to follow the rules of method overloading rules has to be followed. That may be a constructor or that may be a method, whatever it is. Okay. Yeah. So any questions there you have? Anything that you are not understood? Method overloading is okay. So you just do an example. So you can have one more example also. Many multiple examples we can have it. Okay. So there you can have another example also you can try. Then We'll discuss them. So you just try it out. Okay. See, only when you try when you try to write the program, then only you'll understand that you have understood or not. So as long as you just think that, okay, I can write it, I can write, you will think that you can write, but that is good. You think that is you can write, that's fine. I don't say no that, but only when you start writing, you can understand that you are able to or not, right? Start writing the application, start writing the programs for it. Okay. Okay then. Yeah. So moving ahead, so we talked about the constructors, method overloading. Okay. Now let's move on. We'll talk about inheritance. Okay. So let me create a folder. So today is for me, it's a 06. So we'll talk about the inheritance now. Okay. So let us talk about what is this inheritance is all about. So what is this inheritance for me? So inheritance is a concept where we define a new class we are going to define using the existing class. Understood what I'm telling? I'm going to define a new class from the existing class. Already I'm having one class is going to be there. From that class, I'm going to create a new class I'm going to create. You're going to define a new class from the existing class. The concept is called inheritance. When you say the inheritance here, what happens now? What is the advantage for me there in the case of your inheritance? Here, so one thing is what you call reusability of the code. So we have the concept called reusability of code. What do you mean by reusability? So the reusability means what? The code you have written already, the same code you are using it again. So that concept is called the reusability of the code. How the reusability is going to be there, we'll discuss one by one. Okay, not only we have the concept called reusability. So here, when you talk about this inheritance part, so what will happen is the existing members, okay? So the existing members of the class, okay? So the existing members of the class are inherited, okay? So we say they are inherited or made available. They are made available to the new class. Understood? The new class will be inheriting the members of the existing class. The existing class members, whatever are there, that will be inherited into the new class. It depends upon the access we are going to define. Okay, it depends upon the access modifiers. Listen to me, then you can write down. You just copy it from the Google Classroom. The notes you can just copy it from the Google Classroom. Okay, so listen to me. Right, able to understand what I'm telling? The new class that I'm going to create, that will be inheriting the members from the existing class. So already one class that you have created, from that the members are going to be inherited into the new class. That depends upon the access modifiers for us. That depends upon the access modifiers. Now, what are these access modifiers we have? We have different types of access modifiers we have it. Okay, so what are the access modifiers I have? So I have an access modifier called private, okay, protected, okay. So we also have default. Here default means not specified. Important thing is it is not specified. Okay, we are talking about the not specified. We call it as default, but don't get confused with the keyword. There is one word is there called default for us in our Java. So we will not use this. We'll avoid using the word called default there. Okay. It is not specified. You are not specifying any access modifier for your member. It's what you call default there. Okay. Now, or you can define it as public. We can define the access modifier as a private, protected. You need not to specify. By default, it takes it. Automatically, it will be taking it. When you are not defining it, it is going to take automatic access specification is going to be taken for that particular member for us. Or you can define the member as public. Okay, let us understand what these are all mean for us. So when you say the member is private, so generally what do you mean by the word private? Private means what? I'm talking in English. So English word private means, so you also say it's my private phone. So you will not give access or you will not allow others to use it because that is personal to you. Something like that. So if it is something personal to you, you will not allow others to use it. You say it's a private property. Okay. So this is my private room. So I don't want others to enter into it. Right? So we say it's a private room for me. Okay, it's my own room. Okay, private you call it. That means here when you say the similarly, when you talk about the access modifier called private, so this access modifier called private, it's going to have what? It will not allow others to access. That means members cannot be accessed outside the class. Okay, the members cannot be accessed outside the class. You understand? The members cannot be accessed outside the class, but they can be accessed inside the class. Okay. The important thing one has to remember is what? The private members can be accessed by other members of the class. Okay. Understood now? So they can be accessed by the other members of the class for me. But you cannot access it outside the class. Generally, we talk about the using the object and all that. Okay, you cannot access it outside. Right. Now we have another access modifier called the protected. So what is this protected? Okay, so protected means it's going to protect from others from me, but it will allow the access by the subclass. We call it as a subclass. We'll discuss what is that. Okay, access is allowed in the subclass. Okay, the access is allowed in the subclass, or you call it as derived class. We'll discuss what is this subclass or what you call derived class. We'll discuss one by one. Remember, the private members of the class are inherited into the subclass. They are, remember, they are inherited into the subclass. They are inherited into the subclass for us, right? But you cannot access it outside the class. Same rule remains the same. You cannot access. Okay, cannot be accessed outside the class. So default access specification, you're going to have it. So it means it can be accessed by other members. It can also be accessed outside the class. Okay, but you can access it only inside the package. Okay, you can access it inside the package. Inside the package only we can be accessed. You can access outside the class, right? It can be accessed outside the class. They can be accessed outside the class. We'll discuss more about this one by one. As the name public, it says what public means. It can be accessed by anybody. Okay, it can be accessed by anybody. Anybody means maybe you talk about outside the class. Okay, you call the outside the class or outside the package also. You can access it outside the package also. So do you remember we said we just gave you the word, we used a word called package. Do you understand what is that word package is? It is a set of classes. Okay, or we say it's a set of related classes. Generally, the classes which have the relation between one and the other, we'll be putting them in one folder. We'll be putting all those set of classes into one folder is what you call a package. Let's not worry more about this. We'll discuss about this. Okay, next class we'll talk about the packages concept. We'll discuss that. Now, you able to understand? Okay. Let us see how we are going to define the members of a class. Now, if I want to use the access modifier, generally what we have done is we have used only the class followed with the class name you have defined. Okay, we have defined only the class name. Now, what we can do is we can define the access specifier can be used. So access modifier, what you call access specifier. So you can have the access specifier, and then you can have the member of the class can be defined. Okay, the member of the class you can define it using the access specifiers there. Okay. Now, here one thing I'll tell you is generally, whenever you are going to have the members of a class, okay, if you are going to have the variables inside the class, remember we define all the variables will be private in access. Generally, all the variables will be private in access, and methods will be public, or you may have protected, or you may have public protected, or you can have private also. You can have any access specifier can be defined, or you can have them as not specified. For the methods, you can define anything. But generally, when you look into any class, if you look in, all the variables will be only private in access. If it is your wish now. Now, some variables you want to make them public, you can make them public. But generally, when you talk about the variables inside the class, all the variables will be private in access. The methods what you're going to define, the methods will be always either you can define public, protected, okay, or you can have private, or you can have default, depending upon your requirement. We will discuss why private variables will be always private, why it is, we'll discuss that. Okay, so yeah. Any questions here? Anything that you are not understood here? Anything that you are not understood here? Okay, we'll take the example and we'll discuss once again so that we can have any questions are there, we can talk about that. Now, what I'm so here we are going to have a class called the file name is hello.java. So I'll use the same class here. So I'll just say my public class. So the name public, it means that what automatically it means that I can access it anywhere it can be accessed. Okay, so I want to define the class name called hello there. Okay, inside this, I want to have the main method. So I'm just using my main. Then I'm using this method there. So you see that automatically it's going to autocomplete for me. I've typed just main, I have typed. Okay, so now let's say how we define the class, we'll talk about it. Now let us say that we'll take one example. So what we defined previously, we'll take those examples only. So one example I will take. So we have taken previously some examples. We'll take that. Okay, so we have taken previously one class we have defined called employee. We'll take that. So previously what we did is we took one example that I will take now. So the class we have taken called employee. Okay, so in which we want to have employee ID, name, salary, department, role. So to have the understanding of things only for the demo purpose, I'll just cut down multiple properties I'll cut down, or multiple fields I'm cutting down. I'll use only 3 fields I'm going to use it. Okay, then So we want to have the methods like reading the data, calculating the payslip. So these are the two methods that we want to have it. Okay. So I also want to have another method now. So what you call it as so display employee data I want to have. Okay. So I want to have a method called one more method I want to have get employee details. Okay, I want to have this method called get employee details. This method, it will return the employee details for me. Return the employee details. Now let's come on to the class definition part. So I want to have the class called employee. Then I wanted to have variables ID, name, and salary. We said we want to define them as private. So I'm defining them as private. Private. Then what are the things we want? ID, name. Sorry, I need to define the data type there. So int ID, I'm defining it. Then I want to have the name. So I'll define again, this is private, this is string. So this is a set of characters I want to store. So I'll say it as string name. Then next I want to have the salary there. So salary also I want to have the private value. Private, I'll take it as a float, or you can take it as a double value as you wish. So I'll take the salary there. Okay, right? Private, I'm defining the data types and the variables, or what you call the fields, I'm defining them as private. And then the methods are there for me. So like the payslip method is there. Okay, so accessing the data, read employee data. So these I want to have them as public read employee data. So this is my method that I want to define. Okay, so remember, when you're going to define the method, you are supposed to define the return data type. What the method is going to return also, you're supposed to define it. I said my method is not going to return anything. I just say it as void for me. Okay, I want to have a method called payslip. So payslip method, okay, you can calculate and you can return the net salary there. So I want to return the net salary. So for returning the net salary, I'll be taking it as double there. Then so payslip, I'll take a method name called payslip. Okay, then I want to have one more method. We said about get employee details. Now, okay, I'll just say public. Okay, so get employee details. I want the details to be written in the form of string for me. Okay, then string, I'll just say get employee details. Like this method, you're going to define it. Understood? So I want to read the employee details. For reading the employee details, I'll make it as the scanner class. I'll read the data from the user. I'll read. So for that, I'll write the scanner class. So there are two ways of doing things. Either you define the scanner class inside the method itself, and then when I'm calling the method, so it will automatically create the instance, then it will start reading the data. Or what you can do, you can read the data in the main part of the program and pass that one as an argument, and inside that all the variables you can assign it. So as you wish, you can do it. Okay, right? Scanner, I'll take some object obj, I'm taking is equal to new scanner class. Okay, so we know that the scanner class requires system.in as the argument. So I'm supposed to give the system.in as the argument there. Okay, so before we read the data, we'll give a message to the user, type the employee ID. Okay, I'll just give a message. I'm writing sysout. Okay, type the employee ID, type the employee ID. Right, I want to read that. So I'll take that. I have a variable there is called ID there. So I'll be writing ID is equal to, so my obj object dot next int. Okay, I read the employee ID there. The next, I want to read the name of the employee. So employee name is going to be in the form of string for me. So to read the string, I'll use the method called next. Next only. So if you want to read multiple characters, you can use the read line can be used. Okay. Then so I'll just use sys out. Okay. Type the employee name I'm writing. I want to read the name. So I'll assign it to the variable called name there. Name is equal to the obj object dot next. I'm calling the method. Okay. So I want to read the salary there again. So I'll just give sys out. Okay. Then type the salary or enter the salary. Any message you can give anything. Enter the salary. Okay. So I want to read the salary there. Salary is equal to obj object dot next. It's a double value we have taken. So I'll take the variable as method. I'll call it as next double. Then I'm using semicolon. So this is going to read me the employee data. It's going to do it. Now I want to have one more method is what? So we want to have the payslip calculations. I want to do it. So how the calculations of payslip I want to do? So I'll be limiting myself to the less amount of data there. So what I do is I'll take only HR I will take. So this I'll take it as 10%. Okay, I'll take it as HRA 10% of basic. Okay, or that is what your salary. And okay, only one I'm taking. I'm not taking the others. So I'm just writing a simple code. I'm writing it. I'm not writing the whole code. You can just go back to the previous code. So where you can do all that IT calculations and everything, you can take care of it. Okay, I want to only HRA calculations has to be done for me. Then I'll say double my HRA value is equal to the salary into 10% we are writing into 10 by 100 I'm writing. That's it. Okay. So I want to print the salary there. So system dot out dot println. I want to print the HRA value there. So HRA stands for house rent allowance. Okay. So I'm just not writing everything there. Okay. House rent. So plus I'm going to use now the HRA value has to be printed onto screen for me. So my net salary I want to calculate. My net salary is going to be my HRA plus salary is going to be my net salary. So I'll say double. So net salary is equal to the salary plus HRA I've taken it. Then that value I want to return onto the place where we are going to call that. So I'll just say return. Then I'm writing NS. I'm writing it. So return NS when I say it's going to return me the net salary value there. Okay. Yeah. So I'm using the get salary method. I'm going to have it. So when I'm using the get salary method, I want to print the employee details has to be printed. So how you want to print the employee details? Open the box bracket. So now you want to print ID. So let's say 101. Then name. Okay. So some XXX. Okay. Then I want to print the salary there. So that is your basic salary. The basic salary I want to print 999 value. Then I want to print the net salary. The net salary also has to be printed. So which is going to be some value 999. So this is what my output should be looking like for me. Okay. So and then the box bracket need to be closed there. Right. Okay. How I'm going to do it? So for this one, I'll take some variable, string variable I'm taking there. The string variable I'm taking called OP there. So OP stands for the output for me. So that's only some conventions I've taken. Or you can write the output, everything we can write the full word you can make is of called output. Okay, is equal to, I'll open this with the box bracket. Okay, then ID colon. Next to it, I want to add the employee ID has to be added plus ID I'm writing it. Okay, so you can say, or if you want to have the employee, I want to give the better message, I want to have it, the employee details. Okay, now this is ID. So message will be given employee details, ID, then ID will be printed next to it. Then I want to print the name of the employee. So what I'm doing is instead of putting everything into the same line, I want to move my employee name to the next line. So when I want to move it to the next line, I'm going to use backslash and I'm going to use it. Then it is name of the employee. So this name also I want to attach to it. So plus name I'm writing it. Okay. So it will be continuing for me. So what I'm doing, I'll take it to the next line. So when I want to attach it to the, when I'm writing the next line, I want to attach it. Then what I'm doing, I'm using plus equal to, I'm using it. So it means it is going to attach or it is going to append the data to already existing data. Will be to that it is going to add for me, right? So employee name I'm going to give it. The next I want to get the, so basic salary has to be printed. I'll again add one more line, a new line character. So then I'll say basic salary colon plus I'm calling my salary property. I'm going to call it. That's going to attach to it. Then next to that, what we want to have the net salary has to be there. Backslash and I'm calling it. So next to the backslash and it has to print me the net salary has to be printed. Okay. So net salary has to be printed for me. So next salary, I'm going to call plus. We are doing the calculation in the method called payslip method. You can directly call this method here or. So what you can do, so you can call it before, you can store it into some variable and you can do the printing and be done. So as you wish. So for example, so what I'm doing is I'm using double. So ns is equal to, so I'm just using the payslip method, I'm calling it. So I'm calling the payslip, sorry. I'm calling my payslip method there. Okay, so when I'm calling the payslip method, what will happen? It will call the payslip method. Inside that, you're going to calculate the net salary, and that value is going to be stored in return. The NS value is going to be returned there. So that NS value that is going to be returned there, I want to print it here onto my, I'm attaching it to my output, and then that value I want to return. I'll just say return OP value there. Okay, I'm asking to return there OP. And we said what? The last we want to have one box bracket has to be added. So I'm using box also, I'm attaching to that. So this is my code. So I'll go to my driver class. Okay. I'll make use of this class as my driver class. So inside this driver class, I'll create the object from the employee. Okay. Some E1, it's equal to new employee. Okay. Now I want to read the data for the first, I want to read the data for the employee. Then I'll say dot get employee details method, I'm calling it. Okay. Then I want to print the employee details. Okay. Then E1 dot, sorry. First, I need to get the employee details. So what is the method we are used for that? Read employee data, right? So first you have to call the read that E1 dot read employee data. That method I'm calling first. Then I'm asking to print it. When I'm asking to print, I would like to print it onto my screen. So I'll just call the system.out.println and I'm going to use it so that it's going to return me the employee data. So what the data that is going to return for me, that I'm printing it using my system.out.println, I'm doing it. Okay, let's execute the code. So as we say now, as we are going to do it here, first what it does, it is going to read the employee data. It is going to call the employee data method. Then it'll ask me all these, enter the names and all that, it'll read. Then again, next method, what we are doing, we are calling the get employee details method, I'm calling it. When I go to this get employee method details, so in this one, it's going to return me this data, it's going to be written for me. Okay, let's see that. So execute. Now it's asking me enter the employee ID. I'll just say 101 employee name. Okay, so I'll just give John there. Enter salary. So 2123 I'm giving it. Now you see it's going to print for me. Employee details, ID, name, basic salary, net salary. It's going to print for me. So we added only the HRA we added. We didn't add any other things to that. So we are just limiting ourselves only to the HRA part. Understood? So this is how I'm going to do it. Now, what we are doing the changes here is we are going to use the concept called the access modifiers here. So by using the access specifiers now, what called access modifiers, we are telling that the variables are going to be private in access for me. Okay, right. generally, let us say that if you are not defining the private, or no, see, I have defined them as private, right? ID I have defined as private. If I'm not defining ID as private, so before that, we have defined it as private, right? So let us see even dot if I'm pressing, you see something here called ID here. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing something called ID there in the list of properties? What is going to do it? Do you see? I'm getting the methods like payslip, read employee data. I have the get employee details. These methods are there because those methods are public in access. So these variables, what I'm having, right? ID is there. This variable is my private variable. So I'm not getting it. Now what I do is I'll just to have the understanding, I'll just remove this one. I'm not defining the access modifier for that one. And now let us see. So let's see, I'm using dot, even dot I am pressing. Now you see, ID it is showing you now. So the member is accessible for you using the object now. Okay, earlier it was not accessible because we gave it as private. Now when I'm not defining any access specifier for this one, so then what happened? It's going to show me the ID is also shown for me along with the other members of my class. Understood? Along with the other members of my class, I could see the details there. Understood? So like this, based upon the access specifier, you're going to do it. Either you define it as public or private. Okay. You can have the different access specifiers can be defined. So based upon your specification, what you're going to give for the variables, there are methods, they'll be available or not for us. Okay. So I said generally we define the variables or what you call the data members, will be defining it as private. Okay. We'll be defining the data members as private and methods will be defining it as public in access. Can you tell me why it is again? Already we discussed once. If you remember, we have already discussed that. We discussed that with the help of marks. You remember the marks? So there we said something like this is why I'm going to make the, I'm using the method to assign the marks. When I'm allowed to assign the data, I can assign data anything, whatever I wanted. So for example, marks variable is available for you. Let us say M1 is a variable that is being defined, or let us say ID is there. So ID you can assign whatever you wanted. But if I'm having some method specification, if I'm allowing you to do the access through a method, then I'll have a control on what data is going to be assigned to it. You remember that marks there, we said, okay, so I'm giving marks minus 100 or 200 or 300, whatever it is I want, I can give it. But if I'm going to have a method, inside my method, I can verify what data you're giving it. So is the marks is going to be between the range of 0 and 100 or not? If they are not in that range, so we gave the message, it's an invalid marks like that. Remember that? So that is what the advantage of having the method definition. That is, you allow the data to be accessed using the methods instead of allowing the data to be accessed directly. So if I give the direct access, you can do whatever you wanted. If I'm having a controlled access, I'll have the control on what data that you're going to assign there. Okay. Yeah. Any questions here? So for the online, okay, you understood this. So how we are going to use them? So the generally we'll be defining the properties as private, methods as public. We'll allow the data to be accessed only using the methods, not directly. The reason behind it, we can have the cross verification can be done. What data is going to be assigned. Okay, we have the better security control will be there for us. Yeah. So this is how we are going to do it. This. Okay. So using the private access and public access, you will be defining it. These are the access specifiers that we are going to talk about. So now we'll talk about few more access specifiers also we'll talk about, like what you call the protected and all that. So before we discuss about the protected, let us talk about something what we were discussing. We started our discussion with the concept of what you call inheritance. Okay, what is this concept of inheritance for us means? Inheritance is a concept where we are defining a new class we are going to define, okay, from the existing class. So we are going to define a new class from the existing class. Okay, the concept is called inheritance. We said in case of the inheritance, so whatever the class members are there, those members are going to be inherited into the new member. That depends upon the access specifiers what you're going to give it, right? So we just discussed the concepts. So generally when you talk about the inheritance, so generally what happens is you see almost all the softwares, whatever you're going to design, the softwares you're going to design or the applications you're going to design. In every application, we come across the concepts of inheritance will be there. We use them, okay? Right. Now, how I'm going to define the new class now? So when I want to define the new class, I'm going to use a keyword called extends. So extends is a keyword that we are going to use it for defining the new class. So how we do is, for example, let us say that you are having a class called A class is there. So from that A class, you want to define a class called B there. So then what we do is we'll use class B extends A, will be writing it. Now, here when you are going to have the existing class that is the class which are already defined is called the base class, you call it as, or you call it as a parent class, you call it as, or you call it as a super class, right? The class which is already defined, okay, it's called the parent, or it is called a super, or it is called the base class, right? Okay, we define the new class. The new class that you're going to define, it is called the, you call it as subclass, you call it as child class, or you call it as a derived class. Okay, different terminologies you can make use of it. So for example, let us say that you have a class called animal classes there. So from that class called animal, you're going to define so many other different classes you're going to define. Now here, the animal class is called the parent or the base, or you call it as a super class. Okay, the new classes that you're going to derive it, let's say you're going to define a class called lion, you're going to define it. Then the lion is called the subclass, or you call it as a child class, or you call it as a derived class. Okay. So as we talked about the disadvantages of the inheritance, the basic advantage of inheritance is what? The code reusability is going to be there. All the members, whatever the variables or methods are going to be there in the existing class, that will be made available to my subclass, okay, based upon the access specifiers. And now remember, so when you talk about your new class that you're going to define, the new class, you can also customize that one. That means you can change that class also as per your requirement. For example, let us say, there is a class, okay, called animal class, only we'll take the example. That's a base class, I'm going to define it. Inside that, okay, let us say that I'm defining a variable called fly. Okay, I can tell the value, I can modify that value, it can fly or not. Fly yes or no, I can define it. Or let us say that you are having a method called fly method is there. So that method called fly, I can redefine it in my subclass saying that the animal can fly or it cannot fly like that. Okay. Let us take our employee example only, we'll take. So when you talk about the employees in the organization, so the way how the calculations are going to be done for one employee will be different for the another employee. So when I'm going to create a new class, okay, from the existing class, I can change the functionality of the payslip method. We are seeing the method called payslip there. So how I'm going to calculate? Okay, let us say for one employee, you are calculating the HR as 10%. For another employee, you are calculating it as 12%, or some other employee you are calculating 20%. Then what I do is the new class that I'm going to define, I can change the functionality can be changed, right? That's what you call it as customization of the code, right? So this is one example. So we are talking about a vehicle called, we are going to define a class called car there. So from the existing class called vehicle class, okay? So like that. So we'll discuss that one by one, we'll talk about them. So let's not worry about that. We'll discuss the example we'll discuss. Now, when I talk about the constructors, now whatever the constructors that you're defining in the base class, those constructors will not be available for me in my subclass, or you cannot directly, I mean, they are not automatically invoked for us, okay, except the default constructor. So what is the default constructor? The constructor without any parameters, it is called the default constructor. If I'm having a default constructor is there, then it is invoked for me. If I'm having some constructor is there with parameters, then that constructor is not going to be invoked from my base class. You have to manually invoke the base class constructors has to be invoked manually by you. Okay, that you have to remember it. Okay, so example is there, we'll discuss more about that. Okay, so we are having what you call a keyword is there called super. We are having one keyword called super. So what is the use of this keyword called super? Means super is a keyword that we use it for accessing the base class members. So if you want to access the base class members, you'll use super dot that variable name will be accessing it. That again depends upon it is accessible for you or not. Okay, if I want to access a method, I want to access it, then I can access the method inside my class by using super dot that method name. I can use it. Or you want to access the constructor you want to access, then super open the parenthesis, then you're going to define the parameters. When I'm giving the parameters, based upon the parameters which constructor it has to call, it will decide. Okay, like that. Okay, so the example we'll discuss all the examples. We'll take one by one example. We'll take, nothing to worry about. So we'll just talk about only theoretical stuff. No, we'll not discuss about the polymorphism right now. We'll not talk about the polymorphism concept. We'll discuss this, no problem. In the next class, we'll talk about the concept of polymorphism. Now you understood what the theory we said? Nothing to worry. We'll take one example and we'll discuss more on that. Okay? Yeah. Any questions here? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions here? Sure, nothing. So that means you understood everything from the concepts of inheritance. It's good to see. Okay, so let us take. Okay, let's say I'm having. There is one class is there. Okay, so from this class, I'm defining one more class I'm going to define. So this is one class is there. Okay, we'll take the example what we are seeing in the PPT there. So this is my vehicle class, right? From the vehicle class, I'm defining one more class called car there, right? So let me write the text. So this is my car class. What's wrong? So this is my, sorry, this is my vehicle. What's wrong? Why it's not responding? Okay, this is my vehicle class. So from the class called vehicle, I want to define a class called car. I'm going to define it. Okay, so this vehicle class is called a parent, and then the child class is called a, sorry, car is called the child. So if you call this one as the parent class, okay, then this will be your child class. If you call, sorry, if you call this one as a super class, then this will be called a subclass. Okay, if you call this one as super and sub, and one more is, okay, you call this one as a base class, then this is called the derived class. Understood? Then what happened? Whatever the properties are there or whatever may the methods are there, both combined together, you call them members. So the members of the base class are going to be inherited into the subclass for us, right? And we said if any method, if any constructor is there in the base class is there, so that constructor is not going to be automatically invoked except the default constructor. If you're having some other constructor as there, okay, that you have to exclusively use what you call super method has been super, you have to use the keyword called super to invoke the other constructors. So if you want to invoke the other methods or another variable that is which is there for me in my class, that is in my super class or what you call as the base class, then you will be using the keyword called super there, right? Okay. Okay. So let us take the let us talk about the example now called employee. The same employee we'll talk about. Now let us say in an organization when you talk about, so there are so many different types of employees will be there. Okay. Generally what will happen based upon the designation of the employee, the kind of calculations also will be different for me. So the kind of employee, based on the kind of employee that you're going to have it, the kind of calculation will be different for us. Now, when you talk about the different calculations, then okay, let us take one example we'll talk about. So we'll take the example. So simple one, what we do is we have created a class called employee class we have created. Okay. Then from this class called employee, so I want to define a class called clerk. Okay, I want to define a class called clerk there. So in the clerk class, the kind of calculation that I'll be doing is slightly different. Okay, so what I do is I'll change the payslip calculations. I'll be changing it there for the clerk. You understand what I'm doing? So for the clerk class, I want to change the calculations. That is the what are the salary calculations you're making? So that I want to have slightly different there. Okay, so we'll have one more class we'll create. So let us say one more class we'll create now. So let us say this class is called the manager. Okay. So I want to have same data should be there. Both the employee, any employee you take, maybe it's on a category of the type manager or it's of the category clerk there. The ID, name, all remains the same for me. The ID, okay, name, salary, the concept of salary remains same, but payslip calculation only will be different for me. So how I do it? Let's see this. So able to understand what I'm doing it? I'm trying to define a class called employee class. From the class called employee, I'm trying to define a class called clerk class, and one more class will create called manager class. Okay. So we have done this. So employee class, we have done this. Okay. So from the employee class, I want to create one more class called clerk now. So clerk, how do we create? We will be using a keyword called extends. Then, so now, so this extends the employee class. Right? I'm defining a class called clerk class from the existing class called employee. Now inside this one, so for the clerk class also I want to have the same concept should be there. That what is the data what I wanted, employee roll number, sorry, employee ID, name, salary, I want to have it. That data will be automatically what will happen? That will be made available to this particular class for me through the methods I'll be using it. Okay, I'll use the methods. Now here I'll change the method name. So I'll be using a method called get clerk details, I'll just say. Okay, I'm just changing the name here. So let us not worry about it. So we'll discuss that why I'm changing the name. So I'm changing a name called get clerk details. Okay, so inside this method called get clerk details, sorry, I'm supposed to write the void or what it is returning. So I'll say it's void. So in this get clerk details method, I want to call the method employee details method. So sorry, read employee details. So when I call this method called read employee details, then internally what will happen? So when I'm calling the get clerk details, inside that it's going to call the method called read employee details. Okay, read employee details. See, the read employee details, I mean employee data, the method is made available to this my class called clerk class. So I'm just able to access it. We'll see the example. Now, previously we created the object of employee. I'll do one thing, I'll just make a copy of this. The whole stuff I'll make a copy. I'm just making a copy of things. So this will not talk about this. So this is my another example. Okay, so let us talk about another example of this one. So anyhow, don't worry, we have made a copy of it. So let's not worry about that. So now we'll not talk about this part. I want to create an object from the clerk class. I'll just use an object called C1. That's equal to new clerk. I'll be writing it. Okay. Then I want to get the data, the read employee details. So what we did, we gave the name was what? Get clerk data for me. Okay. Or so let us not change what you call the conventions. In the employee class, what we did, we gave a method as read employee data, right? So in this, I don't want to change the convention. I want to go back to the same convention there. Then what we do? Read clerk data. Okay. So just I'm avoiding the changing the convention part there. I'm just going back to the same method. So read employee data, read clerk data. So I'm calling a method called read clerk data there. So inside this method, inside the main now, I'll be writing the read the clerk data. So I want to print the clerk data there. So what I'm doing is I'm not using the other method. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to use the same method called get employee details. So let us see, is it works for me or not? We'll see. It works or not, let us see. Fine, it is working for me. The application is working. Employee ID 101 I'm giving. So name, Loki, okay, salary. So 31,123. So I'm getting it. The name I'm able to print it. So get employee details, I'm getting it. Understand what I'm telling? So get employee details, the method is there, right? So this method is made available to me. Automatically I'm writing C1.get employee details, I'm writing. It's automatically coming for me. That means what? It is not necessary for you to define something inside that you need to call it, right? So what I'm doing here, so inside this class, you need not to do this part. It is not at all required. This is not required for me. What I can do, I can use the same name, get read employee data. I'll call the same method, read employee data. What is changing for me? Payslip calculation has to change for me. For employee, okay, let us say for this one clerk, we'll take 12%, we'll take the calculation, HRA calculation, I want to do that. So inside this method, I want to have some changes has to be there. What is the changes I want to have? Okay, public. So what is it? We said double, right? Okay. So I'll just say calculate payslip. So inside this one, so I want to calculate this one as what? 12% we want to calculate. So I'll say double HRA is equal to 12 by 100. So it is of basic. Now I'm trying to write it as salary into. So when I'm writing salary into, okay, 12 by 100, and then I want to calculate the net salary there. Okay, I'll just say double net salary is equal to my HRA plus salary. I'm writing it. Understand? Okay, I'll just try to return that one also. I'll just say return net salary. Okay, now we'll have an error here. Why I'm going to have the error? Because salary is a variable which is there for me in my class is there. In which class it is there? It is there in my employee class is there. But that is what is the access specifier we are given for it? We have made it as private. Remember, once it is private, we said what? It cannot be accessed outside. It cannot be accessed. Maybe it is subclass or wherever it is, you cannot access that one. Okay. So to avoid that one, so what I'm doing is I'll change my salary type to protected. I'll make it as protected there. So when I'm making it as protected, we said what? The data will be made available to the subclass. The data can be accessed in the subclass for us. Now you see, once I made it as protected, now you see now the error is not there. That error, the red line was there, what? It is not showing now. The red line is not there for me. Earlier it was showing me the red line. Okay. Understood? Understood there? So how the things are going to be done there. Now, in the payslip method, what we did. So in the payslip method, so what we are done, we are doing the calculations and then we are asking to return the values. But here I'm going to have slightly different payslip calculations. I'm going to have it. So I cannot call the same method here, but I have to call this method. Calculate payslip method has to be called. Understood now? I have to call the calculate payslip method has to be called for getting the employee details. I cannot use the same employee details method cannot be used because in this employee details, we are calculating something. Okay. So where we are going to have a difference of things are going to be there. No, I don't want to do that one. So I want to have slightly different. So one method, what you can do here. So when I'm talking about this one calculation part, take this variable outside this. Okay. And you make this one as a private variable here. Okay, I'll make the net salary as private. Okay, I'm making the net salary as a private variable as a part of my class there. Now, when I'm going to use the payslip method, it is going to do the calculation, it's going to do it. Then okay, I'm just going to do the calculations. I'm not going to return anything over there. What I've done is I've just taken it as calculations, automatically it will be doing it. So, but I'll make this one as my void method. Void indicates it. I'm telling that the method will not return anything to me. Okay. Then, so here the calculations are not going to be done for me. It is going to do the calculation, sorry, but it is not going to return anything for me. Okay. So payslip method I've called there. So it's going to do the calculation, but it's not going to do return. It's not going to do the return the value for me. Okay. So I'm making changes into my calculate payslip method here. Now, so I want this get employee details are there, right? This method I want to have here. I'll just copy this and copying and pasting it here. So get employee method. So employee details are there, right? I'll call for the class also, but it is going to do this slightly different. It is going to do. So what it is going to do instead of instead of calling the payslip method, so here it will be using the calculate payslip. You understand? I'm trying to have a different method there. So calculate payslip method I'm calling it. So it's going to do the calculation and then it's going to do all the things for me. Understood? Now what I'm doing, that get employee details are there, right? So in that I'm doing the customization I'm going to do it. The method is being customized. Now let us see what is going to happen for me. Now read employee details, get employee details, okay? So you see now it's going to do what? Slightly different calculation it's going to do for me. Where is the error? No error is there. Okay, so employee ID 12 I'm giving it, name, so Lokesh, Then salary 21,123. Where is it is problem? Line number 52. Where is that error? Oh, yeah. So why all these problems are coming for us? Any idea? This employee ID is there, right? It's a private variable inside my class. So you're not able to access it. Okay. So I'll do one thing. Instead of writing something over here, I'll call my same method. I want to call it from my class. I'll just say get employee details. That method only I'll call. You understand what I'm doing here? I'm trying to call the method called get employee details here. Okay. So let us see what is going to happen. I'm trying to call the employee details method. Okay. But remember, you're having a same name here. So inside your class called clerk, you're having employee details. And one more, you're having the same method. You're trying to have it in the base class. So when I'm having same method is there in my base class and subclass. So what will happen? The base class method will be not available for the subclass. So in subclass, you are overwriting that name. You're using some other, you're using the same name and that name will not be available. So if I want to use the base class method, if I want to use it, we said we'll be using a keyword called super. Super dot will be using it. When I'm using the keyword called super dot, it means you are telling that to call the base class method, not its own method. Understood? Now this method will not return anything for me. So if you want to return, so you can use this same method here. So you can say, if you want to return the value, so now you can call that super. Now you can say return the same value here. What it is going to return, you just return that. Okay, I'll just run my code. So employee ID, one I'm giving it. Name, location, salary, 3123. Now you see it's going to do all the things. So what we are doing it here. So we are using a name called get employee details, right? So but the name is same as in your employee class. So in employee class and in the clerk class, both the names are same. So what will happen? The base class method, what you are defined called get employee details, that will be overwritten in the subclass. That means that will not be, that name will not be available for you. If I'm trying to use a name called get employee details, it will try to refer to itself. It will be trying to refer to itself. So if I want to get the data, if I want to call the method which is there for me in my base class, then I have to use a keyword called super keyword. You have to use it. Then only you can call the method which is there in my base class. Okay. So super is a keyword that we use it to refer to the members of the base class. Right? Understood here? Okay, don't worry. Again, we'll discuss them. So we'll take the examples we'll take and we'll talk about them more about. Okay. So just try to understand. So I'll just upload all these things to my classroom. Just go through them. Okay. You have any difficulties? So let me know. I'll help you out.